Hi everyone, welcome to the 5 Tips to a TechWise Summer event. I'm Kate Bayless, a wife, mom of 3, writer, friend of Barna, and your host for today, as we explore how to navigate tech time over the summer. We have a great event planned for you today. We'll be hearing more about the new book, My TechWise Life, written by Amy and Andy Crouch. Andy and Amy are also going to share 5 tips for a TechWise summer later on in the program. Dave Kinnaman is here and will explain a bit about Barna's vision for TechWise and the research behind the book. We also have some great guest expert commentary from renowned speakers like Jenny Allen, Vivian Mabuni, Heather Thompson-Day, and Shane Sanchez. Today, we really want to help equip and support parents, youth pastors, and anyone else who works with teens. So throughout the program, we'll be telling you about our special offer that will do just that, including the new book, My TechWise Life by Amy and Andy Crouch. We're going to hear more about this book in just a few moments, but I'm telling you, this is a great must-have book for all families, written by a Gen Zer for a Gen Zer. Amy Crouch wrote a great book about her experience growing up in a TechWise family, and it's easy for your teen to read, and you'll get something out of it too. I encourage you to get a copy for yourself as well and read along with your kid. Or if you're a youth pastor, buy a copy for each of your students and read through it together over the summer. I promise you're not going to regret it. Also, be sure to check out the TechWise bundle, which includes My TechWise Life, the TechWise Family, and the TechWise Masterclass taught by Andy Crouch. On top of all that, you can sign up for the TechWise Summer Challenge and check out the 5 tips for a TechWise Summer free download. These are some great free resources for you and your family to use or with your youth group this summer. For all of these great offers, the book, the bundle, the free downloads, head to barna.com/techwise. And for whatever you're purchasing, be sure to use the promo code SUMMER10 to get an exclusive 10% discount. So let's get started today by bringing in the author of My TechWise Life, Amy Crouch, her dad, Andy Crouch, as well as David Kinnaman from Barna. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'd love to start by getting a little bit of background on where this concept of TechWise began. Andy, can you kind of tell us about how this all got started?
I think it got started in 2 ways. One was just when I would be speaking about any number of subjects, I would sometimes mention things we were doing with our kids as our kids were growing up, such as not having a television until they were in double digits or how we handled certain tech decisions. And sometimes it would just be a very minor part of what I was saying. But afterwards, there would be often a line of younger parents saying, wait, tell me more about that no television thing, or tell me how you're handling smartphones or, whatever. So I was starting to think, I wonder if maybe there's an appetite or a hunger for guidance out there. And then David came to me, and David, I don't know where you got this idea from, but David said, would you be interested in actually writing a book about technology and family life? And I had had just enough of these conversations with parents at different stages of life, and for that matter, grandparents watching their grandkids grow up in such a different world, that I thought, well, I think maybe we've figured out some things in our family that we could share. So that was the very beginning of imagining the TechWise family.
Right. And David, how did you put this all together to see the process for a book coming together?
Well, first, as Andy said, it was our friendship, because we had been hearing and seeing him talk about that. And then just the friendship that he and I had been developing for many years, that was the basis for that. But in addition, we had been experimenting with short books, and we were trying to figure out ways that we could make short, pithy, important ideas accessible to people without so many words. And so this became a real obvious answer to have Andy, who's actually quite prolific at lots of words as well, but also in this case trying to really boil this down to an essential idea of how to be tech-wise. And then on the basis of all the research we've been doing, we know from our work at Barna that parents are just absolutely overwhelmed by the technological revolution. We're living now in the screen age. We're parenting screen agers. And what we've come to understand in our research is that screens disciple. Screens are these powerful devices. It's the gospel according to YouTube. It is the power of social media. It is the loneliness epidemic, more connected, but more disconnected. So we felt like there was a real urgency for us, not just to speak to leaders and others, but really right into homes, right into families, right into my household, as we try to navigate these challenges as parents.
Right. And that TechWise family then leads to your new book, Amy, TechWise Life, written from the perspective of a young woman growing up in a TechWise family. Amy, can you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write TechWise Life and what you hope that kids will take away from it?
Yeah, I think all I really want people to know while reading this book, I just want kids to know that they have a choice. I think our devices are just so good at making it seem like there's only one way to live. The sort of screen addicted, David used this word, screen agers, this life where all we can ever be is kind of addicted to our phones, living lives mediated by screens. And I just don't think we need to live that way. I really don't believe that we need to be kind of busy and lonely and anxious the way that our screens, our devices clearly tell us that we have to be. I think we can live with much more hope. And I think that we can be the ones in control of our devices rather than letting, Apple and Microsoft dictate our lives. So I just hope that teens can read this book and say, oh, I can live another way.
That's so great. And the great thing about your book is that it's not just for parents and kids, it's really for anybody who works with kids. Andy, can you talk a little bit about how else youth pastors or other people that work with kids could utilize this book and put it into practice, helping them to raise, disciple teens?
Yeah, great question. I love that Amy's book is mostly from the voice of a teenager coming of age in this world. And that makes it maybe better than my book to actually hand to a kid. A lot of parents and pastors have handed the TechWise family to kids, and I kind of worry that I am going to be known to a generation of kids as the author of that red book that told their parents not to give their kids a phone, which is not quite what it says, but that might be the effect. That might be the decision you'd make after you read it. And what I like about Amy's book is it's this purple book, bluish purple, by a fellow teenager who's wrestling, who doesn't, I hope I don't talk down to anyone in my book, but there's no way Amy can do that. Like, she's just speaking to her friends, her peers, students like herself. And so I think the time to use this with kids is at inflection points in their entry into the world of technology. So it could be, maybe there's some 11 and 12-year-olds for whom, like, they're about to get phones. I don't necessarily recommend it that early, but a lot of parents do choose that. Maybe they're 15 or 16, they're about to start driving and they're getting a phone along with the car. I think that's the perfect time to give a good time, let's say, to give a kid a phone is around the time they get access to a 2-ton, metal and glass killing device. It seems like at that point you could probably handle a phone too, or need to learn to handle it the way you learn to handle a car.
Right.
But I think the moment when you're kind of stepping into this new world is a great moment to have conversations about what it's going to be like. So the more that you can catch kids at those inflection moments, I think the more it'll really matter to them. I don't know. Does that make sense? I think that's what I would hope that parents and pastors would pick it up and hand it to kids and read it together.
Yeah. I think those are the great times when kids are ripe for information and advice, for sure. Now, David, this book is a Barna book, and any book that is written in a partnership with Barna, like My TechWise Life is going to be chock full of data, and this one is no different. Can you nerd out a little bit on the data and tell us what was the role that data had in helping to shape this book, and really what were some of the highlights that you noticed?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am absolutely the nerd in the room, the person who does the social research and all the quantitative data, and the data scientist, and I have PowerPoints for everything you could possibly imagine. So, but part of our conviction at Barna is to be really good listeners, and then to be able to tell other people's stories through data. And that's really what we were able to bake into My TechWise Life, was the stories of teenagers and sort of the whole story of a generation about the pressures they're feeling, so that readers could sort of say, yeah, this is what my peers are thinking and experiencing relative to technology. And so we go through the full sort of battery of things that are like, when do you use your phones, and how do you feel about your connection with phones? What's your emotional relationship to your screen? Do you get anxious when the battery is going out? And, how do we put our lives back together? And so for me as a researcher, I've been doing this now for more than 25 years. We've interviewed, more than almost 2 million people during that time. And it's like a sacred duty for me to be able to tell someone else's story through research, because I've gotten to listen in on lots and lots of people's experiences. So in this project, it's just a wonderful opportunity then to hear the stories of young people, the challenges that they're facing, their hopes and dreams and aspirations. And then Amy did this wonderful job of sort of telling those stories, telling the data, talking about her own experience, so that all those sort of data points are within a larger context of how do we live a tech-wise life.
There really is so much data in the book. There's graphs and charts and percentages. Is that potentially a little bit over the head of some kids? You think kids are going to latch onto that, or is it just going to be like numbers, graphs, and they're going to skip over it?
Well, I know that my love language is infographics and charts and tables. And I'm of the belief that we really underestimate what young people can really digest, and actually living in this sort of screen age, as I mentioned, sort of the gospel according to YouTube. I mean, your kids, our kids are watching so much content, Mythbusters, different shows on YouTube. They're so much more serious about the world that they live in, and they understand data. I mean, we should not imagine they don't get it. So I actually think it's really one of the great opportunities for Barna is to try to help give leaders and parents and students themselves access to data, understand the bigger world around them.
And I would add that it just feels so good as a kid to know that you're not alone with this. I think especially just given how ubiquitous phones and devices are in our culture, it can sometimes feel like you're the only one who feels like something's wrong, who hates having to sort of sit in bed and scroll all day against your own will. And so I think the data in this book is so valuable in just telling teens, like, no, we all feel this. We are all struggling with this. And I hope that gives kids and teens this feeling, not only that they're not suffering alone, but also that they can move forward together with other people.
Kate, one thing I might add is I actually love speaking to audiences of kids, middle schoolers, high schoolers. I don't get to do it a whole lot, but when I do, I love it. And I never change my talk for a school age audience. As long as they've hit that kind of 13-ish kind of transition out of childhood into emerging adulthood, I figured they can handle any concept, any presentation of data, much like adults would, except they contextualize it in their own stories in a different way. And you have to be sensitive to that. And that's what's great about having Amy's voice kind of interpreting this data. But I actually think it's great to invite kids straight into the real heart of the conversation and what we're really learning about how these devices serve us and how they don't actually serve us very well, because kids and adults have that in common.
That's so great. Thanks, Amy, Andy, and David, for providing some of the background and vision of this great book. And in keeping with the theme of data, David, you recently sat down with Jenny Allen to talk about some of the research that went into the TechWise life and her own take on how to disciple kids in the digital age. Let's check that out now.
Well, I'm here with Jenny Allen, who is the author of Get Out of Your Head and the founder of If Gathering. Thanks so much for joining us, Jenny.
Great to be here, David. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're talking about this project called TechWise Life, and we've been doing a lot of research on teenagers and the challenges of this emerging generation, Generation Z, and for those of us who are parents, there's like I have kids, 21, 19, and 17, almost 17. And how old are your kids?
My kids are 21, 19, 15, and 12.
Yeah, so you're right in the middle as I am in terms of trying to raise
Yes.
kids in this digital moment.
Yeah.
And so thank you so much for joining us to talk about this a little bit. One of the things in the research we find is that teens have this hunger for more guidance around technology, even though they often are sort of resistant, to any kind of structure, screen time, or other kinds of things. We actually find about 2/3 of American teens say that their parents place no restrictions on their use of tech. But among those teens who have no restrictions, most of them say they put their own restrictions on their use of technology. So there is this real sense they're having to almost like parent themselves when it comes to the use of technology. What have you found to be some of the things that have been working, even maybe some things that aren't working when it comes to putting boundaries around technology with your kids?
Yeah, so we are definitely those strict parents. So what I'm about to say is not defending not being a strict parent about this, because we absolutely have to fight for our kids. But I would say that's actually an unbelievable statistic that you just shared, because to me, we are ultimately trying to raise kids that are self-governors, right? That they will govern their own decisions and their own relationship with technology. And I'm not surprised that was what people found, is that they will build their own structure around it, because I think they know better than we do that this is a beast. I remember my oldest son, when he was younger, he took all the apps off his phone. He wouldn't have social media. This was all his own decision. And granted, we didn't let him have social media until he was older than any friend that got it. So I want to be clear. We were those strict parents, and hopefully that led to healthy self-government. But ultimately, that still is the goal, that they don't have to be parented in this world, because they can't be forever. And so I think it's actually super encouraging, and also a sign that we didn't know what to do, that our age got technology as adults, and we didn't know, and we were not prepared with how to spend it and how to use it and to steward it. So I think part of that parenting breakdown is we have not been well equipped as people that are first generation iPhone users and first generation internet users. We didn't even know the mess that we were headed into. So we didn't self-govern ourselves. In fact, what I think is going to happen is this generation and the next generation are going to put tighter restrictions on the technology, because they see the danger of it, where we didn't realize we were becoming addicted.
Yeah, right. It's almost like we thought it was like the microwave or the VCR or the video game. It's like what harm could happen. And so I think as the internet and digital devices has sort of plowed through so much of our lives, and awesome stuff like keeping us connected through COVID, but also really not so awesome stuff like pornography and certain parts of social media that actually distract and pull us away from community. What are some ways that you've try to create sort of a self-governance, sort of, that's a weird phrase, but how have you tried to help, even as you're strict with screen time or as sort of technology limits, how have you tried to instill in your own children this idea that, hey, you're going to be on your own, and we want you to learn these practices, not just these rules?
Well, actually, it's by letting out a little of freedom at a time. So I would say there are not hard and fast rules at our house about when you get anything. In fact, we tell them that from a young age. We're like, our commodity, like the exchange rate in our lives and our family, is completely based on one thing, and it is trust. So you don't have another thing to bargain with. There's no other conversation happening. How much we trust you is how long, we're going to give you a leash. Also, on the flip side of that, there are just dangerous things. And so we are going to protect you from dangerous things. I did not see a lot of good 5 years ago in Snapchat. And until my kids were in college, they never got it. And I don't know that they have it now, but that was just one I was like, there's no protection. There's no accountability. Most things we could somewhat monitor and check in on. We could see our kids' Instagram accounts. What we didn't want were secrets. So we would say, okay, you can have an Instagram account. We're going to be your first followers, and we're going to see how you do with it for a little while. And so we would basically let them have a little freedom. We would test what they did with it. We would, all their accounts were private. And this is pretty old. Most of their friends by this point had Instagram. They would say they were the very, very, very last people to get it. And so this was maybe 15, 16, they would get that social media. And so they would get it. And then we would, practice together. We were super involved in teaching them, hey, this is what you post, what you don't post. Then the most interesting thing happened. Then my two older kids became the stronger police than me. They became guides for my younger kids. They became the ones that were saying, you know what, don't even get that social media. It has been so bad for my mental health. And they were speaking into my younger kids, to where my daughter, who's 15 years old, she's not begging for the social media she doesn't have. And she is very protective with her time on them and setting limits and things, because she really doesn't want to fall into the same traps that she's seen her friends fall into and she's seen her older siblings fall into. So that self-regulation, I guess, comes from mistakes made, from freedom given and it backfiring. I mean, one of my kids set up an account that really was a bullying account, and he ended up losing the opportunity to play football for several weeks with his team, and he was put on suspension. They caught him that he was the one that did it. And so my kids have learned things the hard way. They have found the emptiness of scrolling for hours. They have found what happens when you bully online, and they've had to pay those consequences. At the same time, we are strict parents and we're holding their hands. But I want to be realistic that one thing I probably thought when my first child, got their first piece of technology, which was probably 13 years old, 13 or 14, my son, many years ago, I would have thought we could control it. I would have thought we can set enough regulations that he cannot get around them. We can build a strict enough world where he will be protected from the negative ramifications of technology. What I did not foresee is that he would be smarter on technology than me. And so if we don't build kids that have their own convictions, and think about it for themselves, then not only are we going to have a problem in college, you'll have a problem on day one when you hand them that phone, because they can get around your settings. They know how. I found out Gmail, you couldn't, we never had Safari or internet on any phone we ever gave our kids. But if they had a Gmail account, they could click on a link. I don't know if this is still true, but it gives an example of what I'm talking about. They could click on a link and they could get on the internet. I don't know how. They didn't have a browser, but they found a way. And so what I realized quickly is we've got to be a family that talks about it all the time. We have to talk about pornography all the time. Too early, like we want to be the ones that prepare them to see it, and that they are going to see it, and not put shame around it, but put a conversation around it where we're walking through this with them. And my husband did a great job with that with our oldest son, and now with our younger son. And I've had to do that with my daughters as well. And we talk about it regularly. We talk about addiction regularly. Whenever they laugh at me, because I'll send them articles all the time that show mental state and how it's causing depression and anxiety among teens, and they see all that. And they believe it, and they're convicted about it as well. So I think educating them, number one, building parameters and protecting them from enough of the internet that is truly just unbelievably damaging. Get the protective software. We pay the money to have that on our kids' computers, but also prepare them for when they get around it, because they will, and they'll be in places where they have access that you can't control.
Yeah, that's awesome, Jenny. Thank you so much for joining us today and letting us peer into your life as a parent and as a leader. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, David.
Wow, what a great conversation. Jenny brought up some of the real challenges facing teens and parents today. And we don't just need ideas or suggestions on how to face those challenges. We need practical wisdom and proven principles to help our kids and other young people navigate technology in a way that will build them up. That's why I'm really excited to share this resource with you. You can get a copy of my TechWise Life for your teen today by going to barna.com/techwise. Use the promo code SUMMER10 to get an exclusive 10% discount. You can also get a great deal on the TechWise bundle, which includes a copy of my TechWise Life, the TechWise Family, and all of the TechWise Masterclass courses with Andy Crouch. Again, you can find all those resources at barna.com/techwise and use the code SUMMER10 for your discount. Now we're going to sit down with the Packiam family who went through the TechWise books and see some of the lessons that they learned. Well, welcome, Packiam family.
Hi.
Let me introduce you to the Packiams, Holly and Glenn Packiam, and their kids Sophia, who's 16, and Nora, who's 14. And they are joining us from Colorado Springs, Colorado. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
So thanks for joining us. I just want to hear a little bit about your experience, Holly and Glenn, about what led you to be interested in the concept of a TechWise family, and what are some of the big ideas and practical tips that you took away from the books?
Well, I think I read it first, and I just absolutely loved it and was drawn to it from the start. I think the reason is because I felt pretty alone in my journey, just talking to friends and other people, and felt like I found a friend, a literary friend in Andy in reading it. And I think one of the things that I really loved that he said was that, technology is not evil. It's not like we want to keep our kids from it, but if we really just want to put it in its proper place. I just love that phrase. And so I think I've really clung to that phrase over the years, and just trying to navigate tech and figure out what to do and what not to do. And I think it was kind of a tension point for us and trying to figure this out with the kids, like what, what are our values surrounding this, and what parameters do we want to put on this? And just, trying to figure out how to put it in its proper place. But I think I realized some of the tension and irritation for me didn't come from not wanting it, but just from wanting other things. Yeah. And Andy and Amy both bring this out in their books. Like, what do we really want for family time? And we really want, time outside and time over dinner and conversation and all those things. And so I think that was a deeper issue for me.
Well, and you're much better about it. I mean, you're not obsessed with your phone. You're not distracted by it. Sometimes I can't get a hold of you, but that's okay. And I'm certainly the chief offender of, constantly kind of scrolling on social media, emails, Slack, all of that. So I was reluctant to read the book because I didn't want to be convicted and challenged. But when I did, I think one of the things that stands out to me was the idea of using technology to provoke conversations rather than to shut off or, isolate yourself from conversations.
Right.
And I love that. We value that as a family. We like having, interesting conversations. And so, saying, hey, I read this article on, that someone linked today on Twitter, as opposed to, hey, I'm going to be reading this while we could be all talking together, in the living room or whatever.
So Sophia and Nora, I'd love to hear a little bit from you guys. As you guys read TechWise Life, what was one thing that you learned, and maybe how has it changed how you think about and use technology for the good?
Yeah, I think for me, something that I learned was that we use technology so much, but that it really shapes who we are depending on, it can do that for the good and the bad. And I think that the more we use it, the more it really shapes us. And I've just tried to think of technology more as like a gift or a tool that we can use rather than something that we have to have all the time.
Right.
Some like practical thing that I've started doing is we all have a place where we leave our phones at night on the main level. And something that I want to start doing is not having my phone an hour before I go to bed and an hour after I wake up, so that it just kind of takes off some of that tension before going to sleep and you're not always having it with you.
I think the biggest thing for me was realizing that a lot of the way we use technology is based off of the posture that we have with it. Like, is this something, like you were saying, that is really closing us off or distracting us from, Amy talked a lot about just, it can distract us from being productive and doing school. And I noticed that's a big one for me, like just responding to texts or starting to scroll. And so realizing that we can use technology to help us communicate with people that we aren't with, but we don't want it to shut us off from the people that are with us right now, and we don't want it to distract us from our school and whatever it is that we need to get done. And so for me, I recently just found a way to take all of my messaging systems off of my laptop so that when I'm doing school, it really is just school and it's not something that I can get distracted. And that's something that Amy mentioned.
Smart.
So, yeah.
Glenn and Holly, I'd love to just wrap up and kind of think about big picture. How has going through the TechWise family changed the rhythms and the priorities of technology in your family moving forward?
Well, I really appreciated some of the TechWise commitments that Andy had talked about. And so we've really thought through those and talked through those, and some that we have been doing and some were new. I think the main thing for me is that it's not something we decide on these things and then it's done, but technology is always changing and their kids are getting older. And so it's like a conversation we keep having to come back to. Yeah. And so I think for me, it's just a commitment to keep it in its proper place. Yeah. Like, okay, we're going to keep revisiting this and keep the conversation going.
Yeah, and I think that's huge. And we are talking about this summer as we go on vacations, Lord willing, as things open up, maybe little things that we can do to say, what if we took a break from, this, maybe social media or maybe messaging stuff. And we've talked about it with the girls as far as when we're in the car together, maybe that's a moment that we're not with our friends, because technology is a tool, but it is also a place that we inhabit. And so one of the things I'm trying to recognize is every time I pick up my phone, I'm going to a different place. I'm entering a different space. And so in Amy's book, she talks about it being the thing that we go to when we're bored, and that is definitely me. And so the commitment of saying, what if I let myself at a red light, at a, whatever, to just sort of let my mind wander, or particularly even the chapter about sleep, and recognizing that I don't need this as a sleep aid. So I probably have as much commitments to this as the girls do, not you so much though.
Thanks so much, Pack and family, for sharing your experience with my TechWise life. Best of luck as you head into the summer.
Thanks so much.
You too.
Next, we're going to hear from some great experts and thought leaders on my TechWise life and the impact that technology is having on today's teens. We have Dr. Heather Thompson-Day, who is a professor, pastor, speaker, and author. Her newest book is It's Not Your Turn: What to Do While You're Waiting for Your Breakthrough. Shane Sanchez is a high school pastor of Gwinnett Church outside Atlanta, Georgia, and a regular Barna contributor on all things Gen Z. And we also have Vivian Mabuni, who is a national speaker, Bible teacher, podcast host, and author of Warrior in Pink and Open Hands, Willing Heart. Let's watch and listen to what these three leaders and parents had to say.
Two things that really struck me. One was that she has a very prayerful attitude toward technology. She really seeks the Lord, inquires of the Lord, as David did back in the day, inquires of the Lord. And I think that welcoming God into the space as just as simple as our breathing, that is a really great principle that I need to be implementing myself. But I think that parents, raising kids to be tech-wise, that's a great point, to just kind of underscore and highlight. The second one is that her commitment to utilizing technology and even social media in community, that she talks about how important it is that she would not be isolated and just scrolling just to numb out, but that she was very intentional that she would be seeking real relationships with real people, and that when engaging with technology and social media, that would be done in the context of community.
There were a couple of things that really jumped off the page. One of the big things was what was said about families specifically, that was super, super interesting to me. So I think the stat is 47% of respondents in the research wish that they had a family that spent less time on devices and more time together. I mean, that jumped off the page at me. I felt personally convicted. I mean, our oldest is 6 and our youngest is 3.5 months. So I feel like I do have some space and some time to hopefully get this right. But that was massive. To think that there is a generation out there longing for more connection with the people that they live in the same house with for the most part, or maybe if they're split between a couple houses, depending on their family makeup, is huge. I mean, that should move us to want to get this right and to want to deliver on the desires, because those are good desires.
The understanding that we can live a tech-wise life. And I think a lot of times young people, myself included, right? We kind of shut down when somebody's like, go dark, just don't use social media. It's horrible. Don't use it at all. That's never going to happen. That doesn't seem realistic for most of us. And so I think the idea and the premise of the book is like, hey, we're not saying that you can't use it. We're saying that here's what it's doing. And so what boundaries can you put in place for yourself? What things can you do to make sure that you're aware and living a life that is acting like you're aware of some of the dangers of technology?
Most parents are doing all they can to protect their kids. And so I think that's a natural part of being a parent, is that we want to protect our kids. And so if we could lock them in a box or put them in a bubble, we would want them to just be safe. And we also understand that that's not going to help them to navigate real life. So when I think about tech-less versus tech-wise, I think it's naive for parents to think that we could actually completely send them to a log cabin in the hills with no Wi-Fi. I think for parents, communication is key, and recognizing spaces to be tech-less, I think helps to create better relationships and communication. So when the entire family is together, but in the living room, and this is true of my family, I've looked up at Christmas time or whatever, and everyone's on their phone. And I'm like, we're not talking anymore. Like, we need to have like no phone time where we can engage in a board game or do something where it's like we're not on our phone.
Well, you know, in the book, it had this section that, and this is something that I've started practicing in my own life. She talks about how she keeps a Sabbath from social media where she doesn't use technology. And I've been doing the same thing for about 4 years. And I recommend it to my students all the time. I think it's super helpful to take a day that you're just going to totally detox from the thoughts of other people and just spend time thinking and spending time in relationship and community with people in your real life. I think that that's I've been doing it for 4 years and I've seen the fruit that has brought into my life. Something else that I do to be tech wise is I do not get online unless I've had worship. Like, just a rule for me in my life that I've been doing probably again for like 4 years is you will never see me tweet or post or like something on Instagram if I haven't first spent time with God. And the reason for that is because I think there's always so many voices that are willing to tell you what you should be thinking about and how you should approach various situations and what you should be mad about. And I think it's important to take time and check in with God first, right? And have God tell you what you should be thinking about and what you should be passionate about and what you should be upset about.
I think we have to learn to understand the right way to use technology and to raise up the next generation to embrace the right way of using technology. I mean, you can disconnect entirely, but that doesn't actually take technology away. I mean, that doesn't change the fact that it is always going to be here. So I think it would be better to teach moderation and self-discipline. There's something for us as adults to learn when it comes to living a tech-wise life. And then I think it's going to be more beneficial for us to pass that wisdom along to the next generation, rather than looking at the next generation and going, oh, this is bad, stay away from it, get off social media, you need to go in a completely different direction. No, the world is going that way. And I'm not saying we need to embrace all the same things, but we need to learn how to gain and really flex our self-discipline, but also how to embrace moderation.
For me, I'm a communication professor, right? So I love reading research on social interactions. Here's what I can tell you. The greatest contributor to your happiness is always your relationships with other people, period. Even with your job, studies show that more important than what you do is who you do it with. So we are wired and created to live and exist in relationships with other people. And so it doesn't take like a social scientist or a researcher or a PhD to look at technology and see that we are swapping relationship for technology. And I think that that's a vast error and mistake. And I think that's why we're seeing so many young people say they struggle with this deep feeling of loneliness. And so I encourage you to not be afraid to talk to your kids about this and to take control and ownership of the conversation, even if they don't like you for it. I think it's something that we have to do as parents.
I think there are a few things that are more humbling than being a parent, because we really are trying the best we can, but we are always failing. And so there's just a lot of apologizing later. Like, I wish I knew then what I know now. And how would I have parented differently my infant or my toddler with the knowledge that I have now? And so giving ourselves grace is important. I want to encourage parents. We are so tired right now. We have been thrown so much loss and grief. Parents, we are tired, and to be able to give ourselves a little bit of grace during this time, that we are doing the best that we can. Our kids are resilient, and if we can remain humble and apologize when we're wrong and seek to model Jesus to our kids, they're going to be okay, and we don't have to have all the answers. And so as much as we're doing the best we can, we don't see the end of the story, and God is faithful. He is utterly trustworthy, and let's just sink into who he is and the truth of who he is as we ride this crazy adventure of raising teens.
We can tame technology with the Lord's help. I mean, he's not surprised by this. He wasn't, sitting here at the boom of the internet and going like, oh my gosh, I didn't see this coming. Like, what are we going to do? The church better figure this out. No. He knew it was coming, and he's going to equip us to figure out how to handle it, navigate it well, and ultimately use it for his glory, which is beautiful, which also means that we don't have to be afraid of it. We can move toward it, use wisdom, lean into him, and he will show us the way that tech can be leveraged for the kingdom of God. And that excites me, because I believe it's the next generation that may get this right in ways that we can only begin to dream and think about now, which is so exciting. This one's kind of personally convicting. I don't have teenagers, but I thought about this a little bit. And I think one of the biggest challenges is our own lack of awareness when it comes to our personal tech habits as parents. That's a tough one. I think we look at students and we go, oh, you spend so much time on your phone or playing video games, or why don't you ever want to sit at the table with us? And there's even some data in the book that points to this, but we do it just as much as adults. Like, we're not aware of the fact that our kids are trying to have conversations with us and we're staring at our phone or scrolling through Facebook or, looking at stories on Instagram or whatever it may be. And I think we have to start there. I think we have to start at a place of acknowledging and becoming more self-aware of our own habits in order to instill better habits in the next generation. Yeah, I think our own awareness as parents is huge. And I think that's also true for those of us in youth ministry. I think the reality is we need to talk about tech, and we need to model how to use it well. We can tame technology with the Lord's help. I mean, he's not surprised by this. He wasn't, sitting here at the boom of the internet and going like, oh my gosh, I didn't see this coming. Like, what are we going to do? The church better figure this out. No. He knew it was coming, and he's going to equip us to figure out how to handle it, navigate it well, and ultimately use it for his glory, which is beautiful, which also means that we don't have to be afraid of it. We can move toward it, use wisdom, lean into him, and he will show us the way that tech can be leveraged for the kingdom of God. And that excites me, because I believe it's the next generation that may get this right in ways that we can only begin to dream and think about now, which is so exciting.
Amy, you and I get to kind of wrap up here with one last segment about 5 ways to approach summer. Summer is upon us. We've got 5 tips. Why don't you start with tip number 1 of a way to rethink your summer in a more tech-wise way?
Absolutely. Well, the first thing I want you to consider is, what would it look like if you made material memories this summer? So I think these days, honestly, the way that we make memories is usually digital, right? You snap a photo with your phone, or even a video to capture those moments that you want to remember. And of course, I mean, this is a great use of a device. It's incredible that we have these, high-powered cameras in our pockets. But I will say, those kinds of snapshots or videos, also the messages that we send to each other, those just get lost so fast in the stream of endless images and texts and emails in our lives. And more importantly, as my dad will tell you, quoting scripture, is they don't involve very much of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. The 4 sort of most essential parts of who we are as humans. And so I would love to challenge you this summer to think about making your memories in material form this summer, bringing in that heart, soul, mind, and strength. And this could look very different for different people, right? You could grab some colored pencils and a journal and draw sketches of the beautiful things you see. You could pick moments that you're grateful for and write them down on maybe an index card. If you're feeling brave, you could try writing a poem, and it doesn't need to rhyme, and capture something that you care about in your day. And what's so magical about this is that if you do these things frequently during the summer, at the end, you'll have a collection of material memories. And I actually have one of my own, which I love. I have this binder of all of the cards or letters of any kind that I've gotten from friends and people I love. And it is just such a joy to page through and to see just in physical writing the love that I shared with people. So try making some material memories.
That's great. Okay, tip number 2 would be choose something to practice and perform. Something hard, something worthwhile, something that involves heart, soul, mind, and strength. I'm very glad you brought that up, Amy, because I really do believe this is the key. We're meant to live with all these things. And there are some things that we do, and I'm thinking especially a lot of different kinds of sports and a lot of different kinds of the arts, music and performing arts. involve our bodies, involve our heart, our emotions, involve learning things with our minds and expressing them kind of with the fullness of who we are. And to do that really well takes practice, which means over time, doing little pieces of it, kind of iteratively, building up sequences of skills. This can be practicing free throws in basketball, or practicing a new piece on an instrument, or learning a new monologue from a play or something like that. And you can't do any of those things just sort of out of the gate. You have to actually develop them and then performing them. So the interesting thing is, I think our fullness of skill doesn't really get expressed, definitely if we don't practice. And it also doesn't get expressed unless you have a challenging kind of deadline, often with an audience, often with some competition or some kind of some stakes, let's say, where you actually step forward and do your best. And these two things are different from one of the other really good things to do in a summer, which is just to play. I'm a musician and I love to sit down and just play the piano. I can do that because I spent years practicing the piano. But if I'm really going to develop, I can't just play. As good and healthy as play is, I've got to actually set my mind to practice. And then I actually need that moment when I'm going to get on stage or in front of even a small audience and say, here's what I got. So I hope that a lot of us will take the summer, when you have all this extra time, at least it feels that way at the beginning of the summer, to invest in becoming better at something you care about that really allows you to fully express who you are beyond just playing, into practicing and performing. Amy, you've got, this third one is kind of related to music.
Very related. Well, and so what Dad just said about taking time to practice and building discipline into your days, this suggests to me that we need to find rhythms in our lives. And what I mean by rhythms is thinking about the way that we spend our time and how our devices kind of sneak in. I think one of the gifts, but also the dangers really of summer, is how much less structure we have. That is so exciting, right? It's such a joy to not have this sort of scheduled, programmed lives. But at the same time, sometimes a lack of structure in a day means that you end up spending all your time doing something you don't really want to do, whether it's just sort of aimlessly watching YouTube videos or scrolling through some algorithm on social media. And so I think that we need to find rhythms this summer that will prevent us from just using our devices aimlessly. So I would challenge you to make a plan for setting aside screens regularly this summer. Not because screens are bad, but because they do get in our way. One thing my dad does is every morning before looking at a screen, he goes outside and just exists in the world every single morning. So maybe you could do that. Yeah, exactly. Or you could take time in the middle of the day or during every meal you share. No matter when or what time, just find some space where you can exist without your devices. And I think it'll feel paradoxically freeing.
One of the specific rhythms that our family has found really helpful is tip number 4, which is to learn by reflecting at the end of a day or a week or a month with an exercise that we've come to call highs, lows, and did wells. We got this from friends of ours who actually do it at dinner time every night with their kids. They just sit down and ask these 3 questions. What was a high from your day? Something that went just really well that you loved that moment in your day. What was a low? A time of disappointment or frustration or difficulty. And then what was a did well? A time when you kind of rose to the occasion. This rhythm of reflection is a great way to learn about what's happening in each other's lives, because I think it's best when we do it together, but also to learn about our own kind of rhythms of wellness, of stress, of performance, high performance, of kind of frustration. And it's a sort of a simplified version of a very old Jesuit practice called the examen, a Latin word that just means what it sounds like, to examine your life. The Jesuits frame it as consolations and desolations, the moments when you really feel that God is present and the moments when God seems absent, though God is present even in the desolate moments. So just a simple English way of putting that is highs, lows, did wells. And then what do we learn from this? What do we notice about ourselves and about each other? This is a great way, honestly speaking, as a parent, to learn more about your kids and what they're going through. It's also quite an amazing way for kids to learn from their parents how to handle the elation of life, the disappointments of life, and how to handle accomplishment and satisfaction in a humble way rather than a kind of self-aggrandizing or prideful way. So this rhythm that we build in, we do it every week when our family gets together on Zoom, since the kids are in different places now. But you could do it once a day, once a week, once a month, or maybe just at the end of the summer. Say, what were the highs, lows, and did wells at this time? So Amy, you've got tip number 5.
All right. Well, Dad, I don't know if people will have heard this one before, but I would encourage you all, think about, what if you could plan boredom? And I know that might sound a little alarming because it feels like most of the time when we plan, we want to avoid boredom, right? We fill up our days and our lives.
Why we plan.
Exactly. Who wants to be bored? Nobody. But I actually think that maybe if everyone doesn't want to be bored, maybe everyone should be bored sometimes. And I think this is because the best times of creativity and joy and wonder happen once we've allowed ourselves to get bored and then figured out on our own how to climb out of boredom. There is just something so incredible about that moment when, after, sitting around twiddling your thumbs thinking, what am I going to do? You suddenly start remembering all of the things that you care about, everything that you wanted to do, that you were curious about. And I think that we can find that creativity by planning to be bored. And I don't mean that you should wake up in the morning and think, oh, today, great day to be bored today. Absolutely not. But what if you could build into your summer, deliberately build into your summer times when you don't have something planned, when you have not planned what to do with yourself, in a time when you don't have distractions and easy fixes around. I think that on the other side of our moments of sitting around, of those moments of boredom, we'll discover all sorts of things to do. And I also believe that at the end of a summer where you allow yourself to be bored, you'll just have discovered that there was so much more to life just by having sat there and let yourself get through the boredom. You'll have found something incredible on the other side.
So great. We've been kind of pitching this to you, the folks listening, and we know that a lot of you aren't kids. We actually believe this is good for everybody, and that the TechWise life is not, it's not one set of rules for kids and another set of rules for the grown-ups. It's for all of us, and it actually starts with us. So we would really encourage parents and youth pastors and other leaders to make material memories rather than virtual ones. Practice and perform. We're still doing that. Any healthy adult life involves that kind of learning rather than just playing. Finding a rhythm, having real moments of reflection, and planning for boredom. And then invite the kids in your life, the kids in your youth group, the kids in your family into that. Maybe find the one of these 5 that really makes the most sense for any one kid and give it a try together. And we think that you'll find that at the end, you'll be really grateful for the summer you had. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy and Andy, for those great tips. I know that I'll be looking for ways to integrate them into my own family's life as we head into this summer. A big thank you to Baker Publishing for publishing my TechWise Life and for sponsoring this event. You guys are great partners. And like I said, we have some awesome resources that we want to share with you. If you go to barna.com/techwise, you can get a copy of my TechWise Life for you or the teens in your life. And you can also check out the TechWise bundle, which includes my TechWise Life, the TechWise Family, and the TechWise Masterclass course with Andy Crouch. Be sure to use the promo code SUMMER10 for your exclusive discount. And don't forget, you can sign up your family or your youth group for the TechWise Summer Challenge and download the free PDF, 5 Tips for a TechWise Summer. Parents, this isn't easy, but keep fighting for the hearts of your kids. Don't give up. Teens, remember that there is a fuller, better way to live life called the TechWise life. Go for it. And pastors, keep discipling and shepherding Gen Z towards the abundant life that Jesus came to give us all. To all of you watching and listening, thank you so much for joining us today. We wish you a great and joyful TechWise summer.